Welcome into Boxing Scene Today. When you talk about super middleweights, a red-hot division these days, all time, got to talk about the Welshman Joe Calzaghe, of course, retiring 46-0, widely considered the greatest super middleweight of all time. Well, he did go up to light heavyweight for his last couple fights. Well, he just got into the British Boxing Hall of Fame. No surprise there, no controversy. He certainly deserves it. Also, though, at the same event, it was announced he was voted the greatest British boxer of all time as a poll of boxing writers and associates. Do we agree with that? Because we know here at Boxing Scene Today, we are the final authority. To help me, that's right, in studio, the champ, Paulie Malignaggi, Chris Algieri joining us via Zoom. Because, gentlemen, it's all up to us. First thing I thought, being the age I am, I remember Joe Calzaghe well and his way up, but Lennox Lewis is hard to beat as the greatest British boxer of all time. All you could say is born in Jamaica, fought for Canada in the Olympics. Maybe he's maybe not as British as other British boxers, but he would be number one on a lot of fighters' lists. A lot of great boxers out of England. What's your thought, buddy?
I think Lennox sometimes gets punished for those things that you just mentioned.
Having too many passports.
Yeah, too many passports for born in Jamaica, representing Canada at the Olympics.
But he's so British.
He's so British.
Bro, I'm old enough to remember Bruno and Lewis, bro, and you are too.
Bruno,
Like the Brits were more with Bruno. Like they consider him one of their own. They consider him one of their own, and Lennox obviously being British too, but he wasn't. Again, maybe too many passports. They didn't. I'm wondering if this maybe has something to do with that. Don't get me wrong. Calzaghe is in the conversation
for sure.
This is one of those things you can just debate because there's been the British Isles have given us some amazing fighters through the history of boxing. So it's one of those things. Okay, you can debate it, but is there really a right and wrong answer at the end of the day? It's not like it's a big problem if Calzaghe gets it.
This is a barbershop discussion.
Yeah, it's not like it's a big problem if Calzaghe gets it. It's not a big problem if Lennox gets it. You know, there's other names in there, Ricky Hatton, Nassim Hamed, Randy Turpin. Yeah, it's a barbershop conversation. And when it comes to the British writers, Calzaghe won it this time, and maybe somebody else will have somebody else winning it. Either way, these are all guys that deserve to be in the conversation. And then, of course, you could dissect it and break it down. And that's kind of what we're doing here. We may think that Lennox may have deserved it, I guess, because, level of opposition and also beating everybody he fought as well. But maybe he doesn't have the right passports or too many passports, But then you look at Calzaghe. Calzaghe was very dominant, too. Calzaghe wasn't just undefeated, dude.
He was dominant.
It was very dominant in that, I talk about Crawford, like he never had any controversial wins. I'm not sure that Calzaghe had. I think that maybe the Robin Reed fight was, if I remember correctly, was a little bit controversial. But
maybe, but that was pretty early on.
But other than that, he's pretty dominant as a champion. So you have that. It's a debate you're gonna have. Calzaghe had a spectacular career as well, and did a lot for Wales, for the UK, and for his own career.
But the question, Chris, that I want to throw to you is, I didn't really know. Remember, boxing was kind of like they're on that side of the pond until they're on this side of the pond. And Calzaghe was a that side of the pond kind of guy. I don't remember him really getting on Americans' radar till the left hook Lacey fight against Jeff Lacey. By then, he's 34 years old, right? He didn't really get big over here until he started fighting Americans like Roy Jones Jr. and B-Hop late in his career. Lennox Lewis won gold in the Olympics, was on everybody's radar from the beginning, fighting top-level guys. Remember when he beat Donovan Ruddick? So this idea that Calzaghe really didn't get big until he was later. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe for a lot of the fans over here, but a boxing nerd like myself and Paulie, I'm gonna string you in with me for that one. We were aware of Calzaghe way before that. I remember the Omar Shika fight. I loved Omar Shika. He was like a poor man's Arturo Gatti. And he was going over there, and I was like rooting for Omar, and then Joe dominated him, destroyed him, and I was like, "Ooh, okay, this guy's good. These guys can fight over there." And then of course, the Jeff Lacey fight was there, and he completely dismantled Lacey. And I think, and you mentioned the age, he was 34 years old, and if you look at his career in totality, I think I see where the boxing writers are coming from. Undefeated, great long career, dominant champion that defended that WBO title a million times. And then you're like, but he didn't have the names. But then you look at the end of his career and he had the names. I thought that Mikkel Kessler was one of his best wins because he was undefeated at the time. And I think I really rate him very, very highly. And Joe beats him. Then he gets Bernard Hopkins. Beats Bernard Hopkins. Then he gets Roy Jones Jr. It's like, we have two all-time greats on his record. but they were old and it was at the end of his career. So you have that argument where it's like, yeah, but Roy didn't have the dance partner. Joe Calzaghe didn't have the dance partner, but then he gets the names on there at the end of his career, and he kind of slides him into the position. So I see where the writers are coming from. I'm with you, Jimmy, though. It's hard for me to look past Lennox Lewis and all of his accomplishments from amateurs all the way up to the end of his pro career. We're basically retiring, fighting, and knocking out every single person that he's ever stepped into a ring with. The guys who beat him, he came back to knock them out in revenge rematches, excuse me. But I see the point of the writers. Those British writers aren't dumb. And Joe Calzaghe was a fantastic fighter. And Champ, you made a great point. Did he really have any close fights, even with those guys that were...
The Robin Reed fight was controversial.
Legend.
But
the Robin Reed fight was controversial, but the fights where I kept thinking he was an underdog in these fights. Like the Omar Shika fight, Mario Vite was another one. Even Charles Brewer. Charles Brewer was on like a run. He was the hatchet. He was a really dangerous guy. And these guys just kept going over there and getting beat up by Joe. And I always remember watching Joe and his father, and how much music had to do with their style and rhythm and his timing and his distance. He's just one of those guys that I think would have been really difficult to beat no matter what. Because once he got on that rhythm, he was a rhythm fighter. He was just chewing you up on the way in, the way out. He was hard to hit. He was like a rubber band up top. You couldn't really hit him with anything clean or hard. And his gas tank was endless. So, yeah, I think in terms of when you look at it by the numbers, I get where the writers are coming from.
He's a stylistic nightmare. He was very, very difficult.
Yes.
The only
awkward.
The only thing is, you wish you could see that against other guys, because even an older Hopkins really gave him a lot of trouble. So you want to see him tested against that kind of level as well, because you could see his style. If you just look at Calzaghe and you don't know him, you look at his style, like that's a nightmare style. That's a difficult style. Busy, fast, southpaw, like you guys said.
Champ, that's why I brought the Mikkel Kessler fight. The Michael Kessler fight.
Yeah, because Kessler's a classy boxer. Kessler's a classy boxer. You look at him like, okay, this guy can fight, but Calzaghe's all wrong for him. He's just Calzaghe's style is wrong for a lot of guys, but that's why you wanted to see it against certain guys. See, like Hopkins pushed back against it, made it a little rough, and sort of now all of a sudden the fight's hanging in the balance because you figure out ways to offset it. That's why you wish you would have seen him against higher level of guys, and that's sort of why sometimes you're going to have this debate now. We're having it right now. We don't even know who to give, who should have won, if it's Lennox or Calzaghe, because if you can't, that's an era, and I remember it well because I was a teenager during this era. So it was an era where I was watching a lot of boxing and I was paying close attention to it. That is a specific era where European world champions were gifted the ability to defend against mild competition and at home. They were champions in Germany like Sven Otke, Darius Miglashevsky, Henry Mask.
Kessler was Danish.
Kessler in Denmark. Arthur Abraham, yes. And Calzaghe as well.
Carl Froch.
There was Carl came a little bit after, and Carl had to do it. Carl did it the American style. Nazim Ahmed did it the American style. Early Hatton also did it in Britain and then came in. Hatton actually bounced it out well. Naseem Hamed, Lennox, you look at these guys, you're defending against guys that are highly recognizable. Basically, I'm saying this. There was an era in the 90s where European world champions were able to defend against guys that American TV would have never accepted as opponents. American TV was very strict.
Ricky Hatton was in that group too until he came over here.
Until he came over here, exactly. But that's why he didn't get the HBO contract until he came over here, right? Because they were willing to televise his fights in Britain in the afternoon, as long as because he had the following in England, and Calzaghe had that too. The German guys didn't get any American TV. We didn't have, but they had their own TV there. There was a lot. The German TV was paying at that time. But what I'm saying,
did they really need it, Champ?
Yeah, there was a lot of money back then. But they now it's dry, unfortunately, in Germany. Eventually that if you do that, the well runs out. Unfortunately, that's the problem, because then TV execs get mad. That was happening in Italy, honestly, in the 80s, and by the early 90s, the Italian TV also got tired of it because you're like, dude, you're making mismatches here. So there is a little bit of that benefit, and that's the only reason you have this debate here, because Calzaghe's style, even if you put him against the best of that era, it's still a nightmare style, but you get left like wanting more, like, oh, what if you would have seen it against this? Yes, there's a little bit of pushback. He could have had trouble here, but then again, he would have gave trouble because he does this, and it's just a what if style. Because if you look at the analyzing closely, if Robin Reed gave him a tough fight, Brewer's older. Byron Mitchell dropped him. He's older. You're getting these guys a little bit past their prime. You're getting them in
Bernard dropped them. Roy dropped them. They were
but
both
Bernard
older.
is a good win. Roy, it's a little past it. Bernard's a good win because Bernard accomplished a lot after. As a matter of fact, the Bernard win sort of encapsulates everything because it's like it legitimizes him. It's like, okay, Lacey and Bernard legitimizes him. I don't care if Lacey did nothing afterwards. You could say Lacey's the one, Calzaghe's the one that ruined him. So I got to give credit for that because going into that fight, it was hard to pick Calzaghe. So that's a great win. I don't care what the fact that Lacey did nothing after that. That's maybe because Calzaghe ruined him. But Hopkins did some stuff after after Calzaghe beat him. So that's a solid win.
But that weight class,
of course, I'm with you, champ. I'm with you. What I'm saying is, you still have to give the win credit because then Hopkins does stuff later. So that legitimizes it and makes the conversation. Without the Hopkins win, this conversation is not possible, in my opinion. You got to give it to Lennox. Because of the Hopkins win tied into the rest of the wins Calzaghe did, the rest of the accomplishments Calzaghe has, and then, like I said, styles and everything else. For me, this is a conversation. It's a real debate now. Okay, it's Calzaghe or Lennox. It's really tough to pick. If Calzaghe doesn't get that Hopkins win, it's Lennox for me for sure, and with respect to Calzaghe. But Calzaghe has the Hopkins win, so it legitimizes him. You used to have question marks, but you're like, man, you know what? He did beat Hopkins. I would have loved to see a rematch because it was close, regardless. But a lot of the other wins, like I said, you got American guys that were getting sent to Europe at that time that we didn't even know in America that well. Like, for example, I remember who's the guy that fought De La Hoya? Felix Sturm. Defending against Randy Griffin. Randy Griffin was the guy I was in the amateurs with, so I remember him as a name in the amateurs in Philadelphia, but he wasn't really high level in America. You would have never gotten a TV title defense against Randy Griffin in the United States, but Randy Griffin was able to go to Germany and fight Felix Sturm in a world championship fight on their TV network, Calzaghe did the same thing. He took on Tucker Pudwill, who I've never heard of in my life until he fought Calzaghe. Yeah. That was an American guy. That was an American who I didn't even know who he was. There was Brewer, who was a little bit past it, probably wasn't going to get American TV.
He was an ESPN. He was an ESPN Friday Night Fights.
Yeah. There was Byron Mitchell, who was past it, could punch a little bit and dropped Calzaghe. So the debate goes back and forth. Lennox
had zero of that.
Yes, Lennox, because when you came to America, you wanted that in America. TV was very strict at that time. It's not like where it came later, where you had the Al Heyman era, where he was able to get the lighter matchups for his fighters on TV and whatnot, and eventually imploded the HBO deals and everything else. In the 90s, bro, if you wanted to defend the championship,
heavyweight,
fight at any weight, if you wanted to get on American pay TV in the 90s, dude, you were gonna be in a fight. And if you weren't gonna be in a fight, you weren't gonna get the TV date. That was why people remember the glory days of HBO and Showtime in the 90s in the United States. And some guys just didn't do it. Some guys just stayed in their country. And there's a debate there too. Maybe Calzaghe didn't have the dance partners. Maybe there was they weren't around at the right time. Either way, it's a debate you're going to have because I can't help but look at Calzaghe's style and be like, that's a problem, bro. That's a real problematic style for anybody. Whether it's going to win every time against the other great fighters, I don't know. But I could see where it's going to pose a problem, and I could see where certain fighters are going to pose a problem for him. I would have loved to see it. We don't have it. We have 46-0. We have undefeated. We had a great champion. He lasted a long time, and the debate rises.
But when you look at Lennox Lewis, when you look at his style and you look at the weight class, I will put, Chris, and let me know if you agree, Lennox Lewis against any heavyweight in history.
Yeah. And you had a good fight.
Against any heavyweight in history. I was talking to a boxing expert. I will not out them because it was a private conversation. We're talking about the best 68-pounders of all time. And it was Roy Jones Jr. was second, Calzaghe was first. And I turned to the guy during commercial and I went, do you think Calzaghe beats a prime Roy Jones? And he goes, psst, no. I can't say that about Lennox Lewis, right? I can't say, how does he do against a prime Klitschko? I think he does great against a prime. How does he do against a prime Usyk? I think he does great against a prime Usyk.
You get what I'm saying, the debate is there. Like, he can fight.
What do you think, Chris, about that status of Lennox?
Well, no, Lennox is. I had this debate actually yesterday in the gym about Lennox, and I have him as a top 3 heavyweight of all time, meaning he could fight literally anybody. And I'm trying to think of the guys that can beat him. And I look at Lennox. Muhammad Ali, Lennox Lewis, Alexander Usyk. I'm like, those guys can fight and beat almost anyone, and they'd have to fight each other in order to lose. Like, at their very best, because obviously we saw Lennox lose, and we saw Ali lose. But at their best, when they're absolutely having their best night, man, Lennox is something else. And not only, I mean, heavyweights are always different, of course. He had the skills. He had the power and he had the size. He's a new generation. For me, he was the first athletic super heavyweight. These guys that are in the 250 plus range who could still move and box and do it for 12 rounds. I can see Lennox in the 15 round era. The way that he was able to control the space in the ring, utilize his jab, and play chess. He's a master pugilist. He understood the game. And higher level thinking from a guy like Lennox Lewis really puts him in that elite level, that elite class, that very, very special small room. Lennox belongs in there. But listen, so does Calzaghe. Like the champ was saying about his style. He might be one of those guys where you match him up with anyone, and he just does what he does. Because Calzaghe, he literally fights to the beat of his own drum, which is in his head, using that rhythm and that timing, and it's just a nightmare stylistically. And when you've never seen a guy lose, you always have that what if, like, well, we've never seen him fail. We've never seen him not figure a fight out. And for Calzaghe, I mean, he's probably had one of the.
You can debate. You can debate. He didn't figure out the Hopkins fight. It was neck and neck, and then he got the decision. It was close. That fight could have went either way.
But again, when you got a rhythm fighter, the way, and listen, the reason that Hopkins gave him trouble is because Hopkins
breaks rhythm.
Yeah, he breaks rhythm beautifully.
It's
he's an off-rhythm fighter.
Of course.
Yeah, he's an off-rhythm fighter. And Joe, still figured it out. And it was, even though that was an aging Hopkins, you make the argument that you were making. It's like the aging Hopkins might be better than the younger Hopkins.
Yeah, the aging Hopkins got good wins after Calzaghe win. That's why I rate that win. Yeah.
He beat Kelly Pavlik after that, which is crazy. And Kelly's my friend. I've talked to him about that fight. He was in a really bad place, mentally and physically. But yeah, I don't know, man. This is the more we're talking about this, the more I'm like, yeah, this is a really good debate. This is one of those barbershop conversations that are not going to happen on this side of the Atlantic. They're going to happen over there. Do they hang out in barbershops over there?
I think they
do.
Yeah.
My buddy owns a boxing barbershop in London called Champs Barbers, bro. Really,
of course, they're talking about it.
If anybody lives in London, get a haircut. If you're a boxing fan, get a haircut at Champs Barbers. It's an entire boxing barbershop.
So they're probably playing darts at the pub talking about this conversation till the end of time. That's probably more realistic for if you're talking about greatest British heavyweight champion or greatest British champions of all time. Because I'll tell you that's not going to happen in a lot of barbershops on this side of the Atlantic. I'm
going to tell you one thing though, before we close this thing. You got to give one guy respect though, because he came after this era too, and he fought some tough fighters, and people don't mention him enough. Carl Froch fought the Super Six.
He's a nightmare.
But look at the resume, and he fought them in America. Okay. He's not gonna get into this because he got beat, but bro, he got beat by Andre Ward.
Yeah.
Okay. Lucian Boutte was his Jeff Lacey, okay? Maybe not as much fanfare, but Lucian Boutte was dismantling people at the time. Froch went in there and beat the dog shit out of him in Canada.
Yeah.
All right. And nobody thought he was going to win that fight. Just like, honestly, on North America, nobody thought Calzaghe was going to be Lacey because the way Lacey was looking. So Froch had his Jeff Lacey and Lucian Boutte. It just wasn't with as much fanfare. But he went over to Canada and did it. He didn't get to do it at home. He went over to Canada and did it. Then he fought the Super Six, which was a tournament of all destroyers. That's another debate you're going to have that's going to tell the tales of time, right? Would Ward have beaten Calzaghe? Would Calzaghe have beaten Ward? We'll never know. You know what I mean? But Froch fought Ward. Got dominated, but we fought Ward, right? So
and Ward had a broken hand in that fight when he fought Froch, by the way.
So yeah. But Ward is difficult to deal with. But
real quick, something to add to the Calzaghe debate. You got to keep in mind because he did this great interview. Speaking of Ward, you made a remind me. They did a great interview together, and Calzaghe talked about how brittle his hands were, and Ward was like, "Do you think you would have more knockouts if your hands were right?" He's like, "Yeah, of course." He's like, "I was just throwing a pity pat. That's why a lot of my fights looked the way they did." He's like, "I just used my timing and my rhythm." He's like, "'Cause I really couldn't turn those punches over." So you got a guy who was.
But I'm going to push back against that because Joe learned how to fight very well like that. If you take away that, if you make Joe's hands better and he's closing his hands and he's stepping more into shots. Part of the offbeat rhythm that he throws you off so much with is because he's putting them together and that speed and that offset rhythm. If he's closing his hands, that means he's slowing down. He's turning shots over. It's a different rhythm. I'm just telling you. It's a different rhythm. I'm telling you.
So what if? No, I get it. But it's also to what if. I don't think his father, the way they trained, was like that. They weren't punchers like that. I don't think he's going to train his son. Even his son could punch because he probably knew his son could punch always. But they didn't train like that. They trained for the rhythm. So that's one of those discussable things that we're never gonna have an answer to. It's like, wow, what if? But I don't know. A lot of what ifs in this one.
Yeah, but it's fun because we always say here. It's
great
what we
fighters.
do. Lennox Lewis, Joe Calzaghe, give you much love from across the pond. We think you're both great champions. Continue to debate yourself. Remember, hashtag BoxingScene Today. Join the discussion. And we'll be right here giving you boxing news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Join us here. Find out why millions are watching.